Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann Schaub. And before I forget, like I often do, let me give you my website. It's thefearandanxietysolution.com. On the website, you will find out a lot about how to overcome fear and anxiety. There are guided meditations that you can download for free. There is an anxiety test that can give you some insights on what is your anxiety level and are you struggling with it. There are excerpts from my book. There are self-hypnosis recordings. There are a video seminar that is on demand that you can start anytime. And then there's also information about my individual private sessions that I have with clients all over the world via Skype, Zoom, or the phone. So if you do struggle with fear and anxiety and you need help and you really have tried things that just don't seem to work, whether it's medication, you feel like, well, somehow I'm more, maybe numbed out than I do feel alive. And even though I have less anxiety, I also feel less engaged in life. Or maybe you feel like, somehow I've talked about all my anxiety, but it's still there. There's something deeper inside that hasn't been addressed. Or maybe you just recently got anxious and panicky and you just want to really nip it. And you want to really find out what is it actually trying to tell me and what can I do to overcome, heal, and outgrow it. You may want to just send me an email with any questions or set up a free consultations. I offer free consultations for anyone who wants to learn more about what the individual breakthrough and empowerment sessions can do for you. Thefearandanxietysolution.com. Well, we're talking about dog and anxiety. How is your dog and anxiety similar? And, this is not something that is supposed to diminish your, suffering or make fun of it. Not at all. In fact, I just want to open your eyes and ideally open your heart that whatever is inside of you that is anxious ultimately has good intentions and can become like something that you can befriend and maybe even see as an ally. Now, the first thing a dog and the anxiety have in common is that they both want to protect you. Now, a dog, of course, looks out for burglars or, any potential danger. And that's exactly what the anxiety does as well. The anxiety that comes from the subconscious mind. It's a deeper part of the mind. It's not a conscious intellectual process, Otherwise, it would always make sense when we feel anxious. But how often doesn't it make sense? How often do we feel actually that at the most inopportune moment, you feel all of this emotional upheaval happening inside of you? So it's something that comes from that more irrational, illogical part of the mind. And this part, this subconscious, has two main missions. One is to keep you safe, and the other one is to make you happy. Just like a dog. Dog can make you really happy and, wag the tail, jump up on you. There is no one like a dog that can greet you when you come home and show you how much he or she missed you. And anxiety may not wag the tail, but it definitely also is something that wants just to make sure that you're okay. Now, both also set off false alarms. And that's something, we have heard about fear, which is basically the cousin of anxiety. Fear, the acronym is false evidence appearing real. And that basically means that, somehow anxiety or fear both can get triggered by something completely irrelevant. Just like the dog is barking at the mailman or when a car is pulling up next door. And that's something that our anxiety does too. Something triggers it. You wake up in the morning and you may have just a thought about work. You're late for, your deadline, or maybe your colleagues went to lunch without you and you're believing, they don't like me. Maybe they know something I don't know. Maybe I get fired. And you know how those thoughts are spiraling out of control. Or you have, maybe not such a great time with your spouse or your significant others, and you already are envisioning the divorce and the breakup. So what those false alarms often are about are the what ifs. Just like a dog hears a noise and says, what if this is really something dangerous? What if this is something we have to pay attention to? And that's the same thing with anxiety. The anxiety is ultimately coming from a place of, well, better be safe than sorry, better barking one time too much than one time too little. Now, it really depends, and this is the third thing a dog and anxiety have in common. It depends also on where this comes from, meaning like the history. When I grew up, we had several dogs, and one of them was a beautiful German Shepherd dog. His name was Prince Siddhartha, and he wasn't really a prince, and he was actually more a wimp, because he was always afraid when we went with him in the car. He always was afraid of, being left behind or being, maybe sent away. He was afraid when we left the house and let him there for a while that we wouldn't come back because he was standing by the door or he was whimpering. And the reason was that he grew up in basically not one, but 5 different places. It was a family that unfortunately dabbled more in drugs than anything else. And so they had sometimes money to feed him and sometimes they didn't. And then they gave him to someone else who just took barely care of him, and then they took him back. And so this dog was pushed around many times and could never really get attached to anyone until he finally, at the age of 5, came to us. But the trauma, that feeling of, well, the world is not safe, or maybe I will get given away again. And maybe the dog was feeling like, well, there must be something wrong with me that nobody wants me. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy. I don't know if a dog will ever go that far, but let's assume that it would. Wouldn't that sound exactly like some of our anxiety? Because we have our history basically as a reference point, especially the subconscious mind. See, the subconscious is way more active, especially early in our lives, than our conscious mind. When the conscious mind is kind of half asleep and doesn't really understand anything, the subconscious already tries to figure out, okay, what does that mean and how does that keep us safe and how do we remain, in a place where we have food and shelter. The subconscious is on it. Even in the womb, the subconscious is already trying to figure things out and feeling the emotions of the mother and hearing the noises of the environment. And there's certainly a lot of proof for that. But so imagine your subconscious is writing already the laws of life early on in your life. And there are some events. Maybe you felt there was some trauma. Maybe the parents were fighting. Maybe there was a divorce going on, or you're adopted, or maybe you got bullied, or maybe you always felt like somehow very shy and sensitive, and then you had the feeling that you never really fit in anywhere. Whatever it is, your history made your subconscious more aware and in many ways also more on alert, because your subconscious feels more that there is something that it needs to protect you from. It feels more that maybe you are someone who is not good enough or weaker or cannot measure up, and so you need to be more protected than if you would be different. Or maybe the subconscious has the filter and the belief that the world is an unfriendly place, that you cannot trust anyone and rely on anyone. And just like our dog Siddhartha or Sid, you just feel more on the edge at all times. And this is something that you can address. And this is something I help people with all the time, to go to those deeper root causes, understand, and resolve them. Now, on a day-to-day basis, what a dog needs, and this is kind of the fourth similarity, is that this is, basically how you treat the animal. It will learn to also, gain more trust and gain more support, gain more confidence. For example, with Siddhartha, it took about 3 years until that dog felt like, okay, they don't give me away. It could stay in the car and relax and didn't freak out when we left. And they are, there were clear signs that he more and more let go of his anxiety, of his fear, and also of his, maybe vigilance, and was more trusting us. And that is something that we can do also for our anxiety. How? Well, for example, when you have negative self-talk, this is a form of your subconscious, your anxiety barking. Address it. Learn to counterbalance it. In fact, if you have a question on how to do this, send me an email at info@thefearandanxietysolution.com, and I will send you an article I wrote on how to counterbalance in a way that your subconscious understands it. When you're anxious, don't try just to run away from your emotion, and don't buy into the emotion. The dog trainer once told me when a dog is barking, basically what it's trying to say is, hey, there's maybe something out there, I don't know. I'm going to call, the leader, the alpha, to check it out with me, and then we'll see what we're going to do next. Because, in the dog-human relationship, you are the alpha. And so the bark means, hey, can you come over here and have a look? And then you are checking it out. And the dog trainer said what you ideally do is not tell the dog, stop, this is not okay. Because a dog thinks you're barking with it. And so you're both barking and the dog thinks, okay, oh, well, he's barking. There must be something really wrong here. No, you are just calmly checking it out and then say, good guy, good guarding, good dog. There's nothing wrong. You can sit down, you give him a pet, and that's it. You just show with your demeanor that everything is fine and that this is something that, it doesn't need to be upset about or bark about. And usually after a few times, the dog gets it. Your voice, the tone of voice, your body language, your facial expression, all of this can calm it down. And this is exactly what we can learn also with anxiety. We can address anxiety with that same level of calmness and that same level of reassurance as we would do with a dog. How? I will explain after the break. Also, of course, some of you will say, well, what if I'm anxious? I don't feel calm. I don't feel like I can be that leader like I would be for a dog. I wouldn't know what to say. Well, let's talk about it more after the break.